Our guest of honour tonight is a hero of this nation's most frequent battles, those fought between the bosses and the unions.
Let me just say this. Those who think a mediator has to be a nice guy don't know Dick Kirby. He can be tough when it needs to be tough.
Excuse me, gentlemen, I apologise for interrupting you. Sir Richard, Roger CLIMPSON, how do you do, sir?
How do you do?
I have rather
see your
surprised
face
you,
from time to time.
I'm pleased about that, but I've got a surprise for you right now, sir. At this moment, on that camera, we are on national television. And Sir Richard Kirby, this is your life. Sir Richard, would you care to sit down? Sir Richard, in your lifetime, you've championed the causes of peace, plenty and equal opportunity for all, irrespective of race, sex or creed, so affecting the lives of every man, woman and child in Australia and in neighbouring Indonesia. And I now call the first surprise witness. You knew him first as an economic specialist, now president of the ACTU, Bob Hawke. Bob, you, of course, have often appeared before Judge Kirby. Tell us about him on the bench, will you?
Well, in the very brief time available, how could you do justice to this remarkable man? But the thing that has always stuck in my mind about Dick Kirby has been his compassion and his kindness for everyone appearing before him. And that didn't involve sloppiness. But he had a saving sense of humour. One thing I do remember particularly, which would illustrate just how he could muck you up in full flight, was that one of the things we shared in common was an interest in horses. And he used to give me some crook tips at times, and I gave him some good ones. And on this particular occasion, I happened to mention to him that a noble steed called Wartax had a very good chance of winning the Kilmore Cup. And having told him that, I'd forgotten, of course, all about it. And I was in full flight in the early afternoon, exclaiming in terms of the case that we had before them why they should give a reasonable increase. And I was really going flat out. And as I was in full flight, the Kirby tipstaff sort of appeared next to me, and a little note was slipped onto the podium in front of me: Wartax won. And of course I was lost then for minutes.
Well, Bob, we hope to hear a bit more from you later on about Judge Kirby. Meantime, would you care to sit down as we tell you something of his story?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob Hawke. So, Richard, from the day of your first judgeship, you run a friendly court. As a matter of fact, you're referred to as the Smiling Judge.
But I could spot the storm signals.
Your long-time judge's associate, your daughter, now Mrs. Kate Barry, with your son-in-law Ken and your grandchildren.
Hello, Richie. Indeed.
Kate, what storm signals are you referring to?
Oh, well, from early childhood, we used to remember if he'd have or find if he had a tremor in his voice, it meant he was going to blow his top. And when we were in court, if I had heard that tremor, I'd put a note in a law book and hand it up to him.
What was written on the note, Sir Richard?
Steady, boy, steady.
Kate, will you tell us some more about your father?
Oh, well, I think the best thing about him is his wit and sense of humour. And I can remember one time when the old courthouse was Rostella. It was between a doctor's office and the tax department. And Dad said one day, I hope you don't mind me telling this, Dad, but you said one day when asked where you worked, it was between the extortionist and the abortionist.
We're very glad to have the family here tonight. Thank you. Sir Richard, you're born and raised in Charters Towers and Cairns, the only child of prosperous merchant Sam Kirby and his lovely wife Marion. In multiracial North Queensland, your father emphasises compassion and tolerance, characteristics you carry throughout life. Your parents' marriage, marked by tension and quarrels, end when at the age of 12, you're sent off to school in Sydney.
There's one boy who won't pass because he hasn't worked, and doesn't deserve to pass because he hasn't worked. Stand up, Kirby.
You haven't seen them in a quarter of a century, Sir Richard. Jeff Lloyd, Lang Want and Charlie Solomon. Jeff, I know yours was the voice we heard instructing Sir Richard to stand up just now, but whose commanding voice was it originally?
Wolfie Mutton, in due respect, a very popular maths master, made that horrible foreboding. Now, Dick, we are all so proud of you because, in spite of his foreboding that you wouldn't pass, you attained very great honours, not only in that exam, but in your afterlife.
Kirby, you were the first boy, I think, that spoke a friendly word to me when I first arrived at the prep at the King's School. And we discussed many weighty topics there. We discussed the subject of infinity before Einstein tore it to pieces. We wondered what there was at the end of everything when you got to the end, what came after that, and weighty problems of that sort.
Sir Richard, your ambition to make the first 15 rugby team never eventuated, but here we see you in 1921 in the third 15, and a year later you have the distinction of being part of the King's victory in the Uralla Cup in the school rowing ford of 1922, wasn't it, Charlie?
Yes, 22. That right, Dick?
That's quite right. Yes, the once in my life, I think.
Only once, twice.
Yes. Thank you, Charlie.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Sir Richard, 1923 sees you enter Sydney University Law School.
Dick, do you remember the name of the student who, 6 weeks before the third year exams, didn't know the name of the textbook prescribed, let alone its contents?
My next witness, Sir Richard, your lifelong friend and confident Sydney solicitor, Laurie Taylor.
Hello, Richard. Very pleased to see you.
Laurie, you cram Dick Kirby through his crucial exams. By 1927, he becomes one of Sydney's best and highest paid article clerks. In 2 years, he has his own office. But then comes the Great Depression. Laurie, what happened to Dick Kirby?
Well, I know this much, that in 1 year, at that time, he was married, he had a home, and he had a car, and the whole lot were lost. And also that the anxiety that you had at that time about possibly being involved in a motor accident, which might result in your being removed to hospital when the tattered condition of your undergarments would be displayed to the nurses and other employees. At that stage, Roger, Dick was about ready to give away everything. Go to Queensland, anywhere, didn't matter. But fortunately, he was talked out of that. He was persuaded to give up practicing as a solicitor and to become a member of the bar.
Laurie Taylor, thank you indeed.
Thank you, Laurie. I didn't know you could do it for me.
A fellow barrister, whom you've helped with a difficult magistrate, finds you sympathetic about social issues. Through him comes your first trade union case, and you are launched into the industrial arena. And one more thing is needed to transform your life, because your wife is next on, your wife of 45 years, Lady Kilda Kirby.
It's very good of you to come.
Lady Kirby, may we ask you about the private man behind the public image?
Well, Roger, you know, he's never been very private, but we've had a wonderful life together. He's kept me laughing for 44 years. We've had 2 beautiful daughters, 6 wonderful grandchildren. What more can a woman ask for?
Well, I know for a fact that, of course, Sue, one of your daughters, has been sent to England by the government to study toxicology, but she and your grandchildren, Sir Richard, sent this message on film.
Hello, Dad. We're really sorry we can't be with you tonight. It would have been terrific to all fly over and be with you on this occasion. Anyway, Harry has a that he did at school today to show you. Would you like to hold it up and show Dickie?
There's a submarine on the back.
Any sweets? Nellie wants to know if you have any sweets for her.
Sir Richard, the late Dr. Everett believes that because big corporations can buy up the best legal talent, the legal profession is failing the working man. He proposes that a group of barristers be organised to specialise in their problems. What happens when you become a member of the Everett Brains Trust, we shall see in just a moment. Sir Richard, the Everett Brains Trust exists for 3 exciting years, in fact up until the war. And during this time you reveal your unique ability to handle a jury with dramatic flair and make your appeals with common sense basic reasoning. And then World War II comes, and in 1940 you volunteer for the legal corps of the army. Labour supporters are persona non grata, and you end up in the tank brigade. Here you discover many accidents are due to illiteracy, create a plan for literacy tests, and become a pioneer in organising adult education classes. By 1944, aged 40, he returned to civilian life and to public prominence in the controversial case of famous artist William Dobell.
I called to ask if he'd accept the district court judgeship.
Former New South Wales Minister of Justice and Attorney General, Reg Downey.
Only for you, Dick, I wouldn't have come.
Well, will you tell us why you offered him the district judgeship?
Well, first of all, Dick was a friend of mine, and there was a very illustrious Lord Chancellor of England who said that when you were considering the appointment of any person as a judge, the essential thing was to be sure that he was a gentleman. If he knew a little law, so much the better. Dick, you were always a gentleman, you knew a lot of law, and you had a great career. I'm very pleased to be here with you.
Thank you.
Within a year of your appointment, Dr. Everett appoints you a member of the Australian War Crimes Commission. You joined Lord Louis Mountbatten in Ceylon. He is so impressed he requests your services, which the Australian government refuses. So it's back to Sydney for a short time, and then another call to international duty.
Batavia, Satu, Satu, Tiga, Tiga.
A man you've only seen once since 1946, also an Everett Brains Trust member, Judge John Brennan. Judge Brennan, will you tell us what were those words?
Satu, Satu, Tiga, Tiga. They're Malay for 1133, which in 1946 was our telephone number. The occasion for our being in Indonesia was the murder a couple of months previously of 3 Australian service officers who were war crimes investigators. Sir Richard was appointed to inquire into it and I to assist him. Sir Richard selected a court which was satisfactory to all those who were involved. I think he was fairly entitled to say mission accomplished as happily as could be in the particular circumstances.
Thank you, Judge Brennan.
Thank you, John. Thanks for coming. Hope I did run it for you.
Sir Richard, you come back safely to the bench in New South Wales, but in 15 months' time you were sent back to Indonesia, this time as Australia's representative on the UN Committee of Good Offices on the Indonesian question. Its function to stop a major war between the Dutch and the Indonesians.
31 years ago, you telephoned me in Jakarta from New York.
Then your deputy, now ambassador to Indonesia, Mr. Tom Critchley, whom we've flown from Jakarta to be with you, and with him your secretary and interpreter of those days from Singapore, Sybil Holloway.
very nice of you.
I didn't know you'd come to a show. Not to help an old fellow like me. Thank you.
Ambassador Critchley, why was Sir Richard in New York?
The Security Council, on an initiative from Australia, called for a ceasefire, and it also set up the Committee of Good Officers. The Indonesians chose Australia, Sir Richard, and the Dutch chose Belgium. Belgium and Australia got together and they chose the third member, the United States. The committee managed to help the parties to reach an agreement to stop fighting and to look towards a political settlement. And the committee itself went over to New York to a meeting of the Security Council. If I remember it correctly, I think you were the chairman of the month. At any rate, you did the almost impossible thing of ringing me in Jakarta to get a last-minute report on what conditions were like in Indonesia before you spoke to the Security Council.
Thank you, Tom. It's very good of you to come here. Thanks for the help you gave me then.
Great privilege.
And now.
Sybil, would you tell us how did Sir Richard cope during that time?
I remember a story when Sir Richard, he was very friendly, of course, with President Sukarno. He was even invited there for breakfast. And, well, the breakfast was good, but when he was asked, would you like something else? He said, I really would like some hot toast. So he got it. Now, after breakfast, he was taken around the palace, shown around, and the kitchen. And there, they were still busy making more hot toast. And this man was sitting, holding the toast over charcoal brazier, keep burning it one side, then the other. And to keep it really hot for Sir Richard, they kept it under their arm. That put him off hot toast in Indonesia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sybil.
Prime Minister Ben Chifley personally asks you to take a seat on the Federal Arbitration Court, and you accept. Now, you and Ben Chifley share the same birthday, and you've said that his philosophy most profoundly influenced your life. Sir Richard, what did you most admire about Ben Chifley?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer shortly, but I suppose the thing about Ben Chifley that impressed me most, and also all people who came into contact with him, was that he realized the dreadful and awful responsibilities of being Prime Minister of Australia, and was always very much the Prime Minister of our country. But at the same time, he never lost his personal appeal and common touch. He could sit down and chat with you and make you feel at home. But the idea of him being just a homespun man without always remembering that he was Prime Minister is wrong. He combined the two things in a magnificent way, I think.
In 1956, when the Conciliation and Arbitration Commission is created, you become president. Now, Bob Hawke, perhaps you could tell us what the commission accomplished under Sir Richard's 17-year tenure.
I think one of Sir Richard's major achievements through his kindness and compassion to people appearing before him was to encourage considered discussion and debate. I tend to think the thing that he would remember high on the list, and certainly one which I recall and is recalled by most Australians, is in 1966 his involvement in the granting of equal pay to Aboriginal stockmen, which was a major breakthrough in the new consciousness of Australians to their responsibilities to the Aboriginal people.
Sir Richard, by 1972, fatigue, an undiagnosed illness, constant attacks by the press, and a feeling that you're not doing enough work force you to retire. Not one to sit still, though. You accept a post as chairman of the Advertising Standards Council of Australia. For your work, on which you're made Advertising Man of the Year in 1978, you go to Perth for the council and make a television appearance.
I didn't know him, but I called him and told him that he needed some medical attention.
You've never seen the owner of that voice, Sir Richard, the specialist who diagnosed your condition after seeing you on television. We've flown him from Perth to be with you tonight. Doctor, due to professional ethics, we know that you prefer to remain anonymous, but I believe you can tell us what happened.
Sir Richard was being interviewed in Perth, and I looked at him and he struck me as a fairly typical case of fairly severe thyroid deficiency. I phoned up 2 of my specialist colleagues to get further opinions, but they were unfortunately out. And so I finally phoned Sir Richard at his hotel and told him that he would be better off with some treatment.
I think he saved my life, but the big thing about it is that I've always gone around thinking him inside a halo, you know, but I thought he was an old chap like me.
Doctor, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Sir Richard, you've served under many Prime Ministers, and former Liberal Prime Minister Sir William McMahon has filmed this greeting to you.
I've known you during the time that I was Minister for Labour and National Service, and also when I was Treasurer. And frequently we had quarrels about the decisions that you'd made as President of the Arbitration Commission. But the moment we'd had an argument, we forgot what had happened before. And we were then good friends again. You'd put your arms round my shoulder and say, Bill, back so-and-so, and the last it'll be about 3-1.
Sir Richard, do you recognise this voice?
I never appeared before him, but I did sit at his feet.
Former Prime Minister, Mr. Gough Whitlam. Mr. Whitlam, what would you like to say about your friend, Sir Richard?
Sir Richard's mostly known to Australians. He'd be the best known judge in our generation in Australia because as the first president of the Arbitration Commission, he faced up to industrial justice and he made some very much appreciated awards. One of my predecessors, Sir Robert Menzies, because of the cost of those awards, according to one of Dick's favourite stories, introduced him to the Queen as saying, "Ma'am, this is my most expensive judge." Now, I think if I were introducing Sir Richard to the Queen, I'd say, "Ma'am, this is the sort of judge you should have as Governor-General." A couple of months after I became Prime Minister, I made a visit to Indonesia. We couldn't start off our relations with Indonesia better than asking Dick and Hilda Kirby to come with us. And they did. And they were most warmly received by the whole of that generation, the Vice President, Dr. Hatta, and his wife from that time, and a very great number of those people.
Mr. Whitlam, can I just say there, thank you for being with us, because Sir Richard Kirby,
thank you, God.
This is your life.
Our guest at the Boulevard Hotel and when in Melbourne at the St Kilda Road Travel Lodge. Bringing Australians together like this is part of TAA's Family Way service.